In a magical world, Negi, a young man with red hair, becomes the teacher at a women's academy. One day, an accident caused by his incredible magical power leaves all the students without clothes, which leads the young women to punish him. Evangeline, a vampire of over 700 years who was a companion of Negi, tells that she herself takes care of her grandson Tauda, a brave and energetic young man. In an attempt to defeat Evangeline and learn magic, Tauda and his friends fail, and later, Evangeline refuses to teach magic to Tauda. With the need to find someone to teach them magic, Tauda decides to visit his deceased relatives at the cemetery and symbolically speaks with his grandfather Negi. The spirit of Tauda's grandfather tells him that he is waiting for him at the top of the orbital elevator, known as the Pillar of Heaven in the capital of the country. Meanwhile, Tauda's friends talk about his past, how he lost his parents in an accident and suffered from amnesia as a result, not remembering anything about his previous life. After losing his parents and suffering from amnesia, Tauda is taken care of by Evangeline. Professor Takabana teaches magic to Tauda's group and gives him a bracelet as a gift. Tauda gives it to Evangeline, but it turns out to be a tracker that is used by Tauda's friends to ambush Evangeline. Using magic, they manage to immobilize her, but then Takabana appears and reveals himself as a bounty hunter who had been posing as a teacher for months to kill Evangeline. The intensity of the moment reaches its climax when the assassin lunges at the woman, trying to take her life. But despite the violent attack, she resists with determination and courage, although the bracelet she wears makes her unable to use her magic. Takabana, observing the bravery of the blonde, doesn't hesitate to mention the 600 million reward offered for her. At that moment, Tauda makes his triumphant entrance and attacks the killer, but his bravery doesn't save him from the tragic fate that awaits him. The villain cuts off his arm, leaving Tauda in a vulnerable position. Despite Evangeline's protection of the young protagonist, the price of her protection is her own life, as she is torn apart by the evil assassin. Tauda suffers the same fate. But just before the lights go out, the blonde reveals a dark secret. She turned him into an immortal monster, which allowed him to stay alive despite adverse circumstances. In the critical moment, Tauda faces a life or death choice: drink the vampire's blood and become an immortal warrior, or drink his own blood and remain human. Without a second thought, the protagonist drinks the vampire's blood, thus gaining a powerful boost to fight against the evil assassin. With superhuman strength, our young hero defeats the villain with a single blow. However, the intensity of the confrontation leaves him unconscious, and upon regaining consciousness, he finds himself in Evangeline's lap. She reveals that she is a vampire over 700 years old, and that Tauda's parents did not die in an accident, but that she defeated them in a duel, and as a last wish, they asked her to take care of the young man. The vampire feels guilty and apologizes to the young protagonist for condemning him to an immortal life, knowing that he will have to endure the loss of his loved ones over time. However, Tauda finds comfort in knowing that he will have Evangeline as an immortal companion on this journey of life. The next day, Tauda and Evangeline set out together for the capital of the country, New Tokyo, with the goal of climbing to the top of the Pillar of the Sky. Along the way, Tauda complains that they haven't found anyone, despite having walked so far. Evangeline explains that the world's population has decreased dramatically, reduced to less than a quarter of its peak. Although this seems to not interest Tauda much, he continues on his way. After taking a break, Tauda takes a bath in the river and worries about the fact that his immortality means he will always be 14 years old. However, he gets distracted in his thoughts and is carried away by the current, colliding with a seemingly feminine young person named Kiramaru, who gets scared and attacks Tauda with his katana. Fortunately, Tauda manages to dodge the attack and praises his assailant's skills. After calming down and getting dressed, both young men sit on a bench at the service station to chat. Kiramaru reveals that he was expelled from his clan, Fushigari, until he finds a woman named Evangeline and fulfills his mission. Evangeline appears on the scene and the young man attacks her with his katana but is killed by her with a single blow. Tauda becomes very scared as he had planned to befriend Kiramaru. Evangeline reveals that Kiramaru belongs to a clan of immortal hunters, which is ironic because Kiramaru himself is also immortal. Within a few minutes, Kiramaru recovers from his injury and decides to fight again. Evangeline tells him not to be foolish and that he won't be able to defeat her. However, Kiramaru insists so much that Evangeline tells him that if he defeats her disciple Tauda, she will fight him. Kiramaru agrees, faces our young hero, and manages to cut off his head. However, the protagonist has an immortality that defies natural laws and puts his head back on. He then delivers a devastating punch to Kiramaru and defeats him. After losing, Kiramaru accepts any kind of order. As expected, Tauta asks him to be best friends since they are both immortal. Both young men then sign their alliance in blood. A few hours later, the three characters head to a hot spring resort. While there, Kiramaru tells the protagonist that he is the only immortal member of his family, which is why he was expelled and given the mission to defeat Evangeline as an excuse. Our hero tells him that it doesn't make sense for him to return to that clan and suggests that he stay with them since they are all immortal. However, Kiramaru is still not feeling secure and rejects the offer. Then, the protagonist has the idea to spy on the women's bath. When he arrives, he encounters Evangeline, who is in her true form. Our young hero does not recognize her, so the blonde takes a magical aging pill and adopts her adult appearance. Tauta realizes that it is Evangeline, and the busty woman explains that her true form is that of a child, and the adult form is a facade. Our young hero makes a comment about the blonde's body, which angers her. They start fighting as usual, and as always, Evangeline defeats Tauta. Kiramaru joins the fray and helps our hero defeat the busty woman. In the end, the protagonist takes Evangeline's towel and wins the fight. Tauta takes the opportunity to ask the young man to join them on their journey. This time, Kiramaru accepts, and if that wasn't enough, Evangeline recruits him as her new disciple. Everyone gets dressed and heads towards the capital of Japan. Along the way, Tauta sets a goal for himself to find more immortal people to create a squad of friends to help society. Suddenly, a group of cars appears and several people step out. It is then that Evangeline reveals that in her 700 years of existence, she has managed to create an organization for immortals, the Immortal Family, UQ Holder. Tauta feels very excited to learn about this organization and is even more motivated to know that Senkaiokun, UQ Holder's base, is located next to the country's capital. When our young hero arrives at his destination, he meets Makabe, a bespectacled man. He tells the protagonist that within the organization, there are all kinds of immortals, but there are only 2 vampires, referring to the protagonist and the busty blonde. The only way to enter UQ Holder is by passing a test, which consists of landing a single blow on one of the instructors. With this in mind, Makabe tells Kiramaru to face him, while Karin, a short-haired young woman, must fight Tauta. The test begins, and the protagonist is instantly defeated. After his resounding defeat, our young hero accidentally finds a strange door. Upon entering, he encounters Shishido, the second strongest warrior after Evangeline, who would be UQ Holder number 2. Shishido suggests to the protagonist that he should try to pull the katana from the stone. Shishido tells the protagonist that the sword is a legendary weapon that will give him incredible power. Our young hero tries to pull the katana, but it is impossible. Suddenly, the weapon speaks to him and tells him to move the knob on the handle. After doing so, Tauta lifts the sword effortlessly. Shishido scolds the katana for revealing the trick to the protagonist. He then explains that the sword is special because its weight can be adjusted at will. Shishido chooses to demonstrate by moving the knob and making the sword weigh 50,000 times its weight. He then swings it violently, generating an incredible shockwave. Tauta is impressed because the sword can cause a lot of damage with a simple movement. Shishido mentions that if he wants to master this incredible weapon, he will have to train hard, or he won't be able to lift it. Our young hero becomes motivated and commits to practicing daily. Kiramaru and Tauta then train like crazy to pass the test and enter UQ Holder. After a tough process, the moment of truth arrives. Kiramaru faces off against Makabe, while Tauta fights Karin. During the battle, they both show incredible progress and manage to win. Monsters suddenly appear and try to devour Shinobu, a maid at the base. The protagonist immediately drops what he is doing and goes to help her. Everything ends when our young hero increases the weight of his weapon by 50,000 and destroys the monster. After passing the entrance exam, Evangeline gives the main duo their first mission, to defeat all the monsters living in the depths of the base. And as punishment for drinking her imported liquor, the blonde sends Shishido to collaborate with the 2 young ones. A few days later, the busty woman gives them another mission, which will be commanded by Karin. As the characters head to their destination, the young girl explains that UQ Holder is dedicated to helping people who are outside of society. The mission they must fulfill is simple. They must defeat some thugs who want to kill all the poor people in a slum. This is because the people in the capital do not want to see that kind of poverty. When they arrive, the nun in charge of the place provides them with context. Seeing that the thugs have not yet appeared, Karin, Kiramaru, and Tauta play arm wrestling to decide who will cook. The protagonist loses all the matches. When the children and adults at the church try the protagonist's food, they praise it as very delicious. Our young hero wonders why he lost in arm wrestling. It is then that one of his comrades tells him that if he wants to win, he must improve his footwork. Tauta starts practicing in a secluded area, and there he meets Kaido, a wandering martial arts master. This person shows our young hero how to properly use footwork. The protagonist is amazed to see that Kaido can move at incredible speeds without raising dust, and his technique is such that he can step on air. Tauta asks him to teach him, and the man agrees since he notices talent in the young man. The essential thing to mastering footwork is to use the feet as if they were hands. With this in mind, Tauta begins cooking with his feet, brushing his teeth with his feet, and doing everything with his paws. After a few days, he acquires great skill in footwork. However, things take a dark turn because Kaido meets Nagumo and Ko. The three of them were hired to destroy the slum. This means that the protagonist will have to face Kaido. Before starting his job, Kaido transforms into a werewolf. That same afternoon, Ko attacks Karin. During the confrontation, the thug realizes that the young girl's immortality is special since she cannot be hurt but can feel the pain. With the above in mind, he immobilizes her and begins to torture her. Meanwhile, transformed Kaido encounters our protagonist. The protagonist immediately realizes the situation and tries to fight back. However, Kaido knows techniques to deal with immortals, and using an ability called Crucifix Coffin Seal, he takes Tauta out of commission. Nagumo mentions that there are many types of immortality in the world, and they are specialists in defeating them. The only one who stands up to the bad guys is Kiromaru. However, Kaido uses his quick step and defeats him in a snap. When all seemed lost, a little boy tries to help the protagonists. But obviously, he is beaten up, and before he is killed, Kiromaru protects him. It is then that the protagonist enters the scene and shows a new power-up. Meanwhile, Karin chooses to use her celestial abilities and defeats Ko with a barrage of punches. Minutes later, she reunites with the protagonist. Tauta faces off against Kaido and beats him up. However, the latter decides to use all his speed and pierces Tauta's chest. It is then that Tauta unleashes all his strength and transforms, releasing a strange energy. Nagumo explains that this power is called Magia Erebia. It is a type of dark energy that contains the ultimate secret of immortality. The old man says that during his life, he only knew two people with that power, Evangeline and Negi. He finds it almost unreal that a child possesses that energy. Our boy ends up defeating his rival but decides not to kill him as he is fond of him. After the fight, Kaido and Tauta have an arm wrestling match to test the progress of his disciple. During the clash, Kaido realizes that the young man is not using Magia Erebia, but his own strength. Tauta ends up winning. Meanwhile, the bad guys manage to set a large part of the city on fire. However, Evangeline appears and uses an ice spell to put out the fire. After greeting her, Nagumo and Kaido leave. It is unknown what happened to Ko. A few days later, Kiromaru begins to realize that she has feelings for the protagonist. And things get complicated when Karin sees her naked. The young woman mentions that Kiromaru is a woman, and to clarify things, the young man explains that within his clan, it is normal for its members not to have a gender until they are 16 years old. After that time, through a ritual, they choose what they will be. Karin asks her to choose to be a woman and stay by Tauta's side. Kiromaru asks why she wants that, and Karin replies that she does not want the protagonist near Evangeline. At that moment, a young man named Iku appears and comments that it is not good to force anyone. It is best for Kiromaru to choose on her own. With the intention of testing her emotions for Tauta, the blonde comes up with the idea of having Kiromaru dress up and go on a date with our young man. To everyone's surprise, the protagonist falls for the trick and goes out with Kiromaru. They both walk around the city and experience typical things from romantic comedies. Everything goes downhill when they visit the Pillar of Heaven, and suddenly Ko and another person appear and attack the couple. The protagonist is attacked by surprise, and that's how he gets captured. Kiromaru suffers the same fate, but at the last moment, she overcomes the situation, saves her friend, and defeats the two bad guys. When things calm down, the protagonist comments that the blonde girl is his ideal woman. Upon hearing this, Kiromaru opts to take more time to decide on his gender. After the date, the protagonist meets up with Iku and Karin, but not only with them, as a little girl named Sakurame accompanies them. The little girl asks to speak alone with our young man. When the two are alone, she begins to treat him with too much familiarity, to which our young man asks what she is doing. She replies that he has left her unprotected several times already. Tauta still doesn't understand. Suddenly, a shadow appears, slices the girl's neck, and disappears. Sakurame takes the hand of our hero and reverses time. Following that, the little girl puts him in context. Apparently, she has a type of immortality that allows her to revive through time travel. To achieve it, she has to create sand mounds as save points, which will remain valid as long as the flame of the small torch burns. When she dies, she immediately returns to the nearest save point. Sakurai tells the protagonist that she tried to tell him that something terrible would happen soon, but she was always attacked, and on top of that, he always chased after the culprit. A few minutes later, things become complicated again when that shadow appears, but this time Tauta defends the girl. The person who was attacking Sakurai is KO. Our young man lands a good blow and sends the crook flying. With the situation under control, the little girl tells the protagonist that she traveled to the past with the intention of warning him that afternoon Fate will kidnap him. The girl explains that Fate appeared, defeated Iku and company, and then kidnapped Tauta. Just when he was about to petrify her so she couldn't time travel, Sakurai took her own life. That's why she's there now telling him everything. Tauta tries to process all the information. Later, Karin, Iku, and Kiramaru appear. Our young man tells them everything. Immediately, the group begins to organize a plan to stop Fate. The mission is simple: they are going to turn the hunter into the prey. In other words, the main group will use the information that the little girl gave them to get ahead and catch Fate. In the middle of the plan, Evangeline calls our young man and explains what's going on with the villain. The blonde reveals that 80 years ago, Negi and he were comrades and achieved many feats together. But when Negi died, Fate's personality and behavior changed. Now he is a threat to humanity. The reason he wants to kidnap Tauta is simple. He knows that Tauta is Negi's grandson. The busty woman finishes her communication by saying that whatever offer Fate makes, he should reject it. Fate appears, and Tauta's comrades immediately prepare to attack. But things get complicated because our young man's old friends enter the scene, and things get messy. Suddenly, a blue-haired woman cuts off Iku's hand so he won't signal. The plan to catch Fate fails. However, things are not lost yet, as the albino shows a strange cordiality and greets Tauta warmly. In the blink of an eye, things get tense, and the villain takes the protagonist's friends hostage. With a clear advantage, Fate asks Tauta to tell his comrades to come out of their hiding place and abandon the idea of attacking him. He then offers the protagonist to go with him, claiming that if he stays with Evangeline, he will waste his talent. Our young man rejects the offer and, using his cunning, scares away all the people near the villain. Karin enters the scene and removes Tauta's friends from the battlefield so that Fate is left without hostages. And things get even better because Iku frees himself and activates the signal. Quickly, a lightning bolt strikes directly on the albino's head, although the latter manages to stop it. The tables turn when Sakurai tries to kill Fate, but he anticipates it and petrifies her. The plan fails again, and to make matters worse, they no longer have the blonde girl to go back in time. Tauta faces off against the albino, and the two have a fierce fight. Throughout the encounter, Fate shows his superiority, but the protagonist manages to surprise him. During the fight, Karin calls Tauta and tells him that Sakurai has a strange counter. Upon hearing this, Tauta understands everything. Without hesitation, he directs the fight to the location where the blonde girl is petrified. The counter reaches 0, and the little girl returns to normal, takes her life, not before coming into contact with Fate, Tauta, and the rest of his allies. The plan was a success. The little blonde girl managed to go back in time and locked the albino in Senkaiyokan's cave, the base of the UQ holder organization. Evangeline mocks Fate for falling into her student's trap. The busty woman wants to talk to the white-haired man, but he refuses, arguing that if she does not join him, there is nothing to talk about. Intent on acknowledging the protagonist group's cunning, Fate tells them that in exchange for his freedom, he will answer any question since he knows everything. Our young man can't decide, so Iku is the first to ask. The blonde man questions the villain why he wants to capture Tauta. Fate replies that he needs him to save Negi, who is trapped, and if they free him, they can save the solar system from a terrible fate. Karin is next. She chooses a romantic question about Negi and Evangeline. The albino decides not to answer as the busty woman threatens him. However, Fate comments that Negi was very popular. Kiramaru asks about the fate of the solar system, and the albino praises the boy's perspicacity and tells him that the world will be in danger in about 20 years. Our young man decided on his question and throws it. He asks Fate if he was the one who killed his parents, and the white-haired man answers yes. Upon hearing that, the protagonist prepares to fight. Just at that moment, a hologram of Negi appears. Tauta's grandfather starts talking, and just when he was about to reveal something crucial to the plot, Evangeline orders the feminine boy to destroy the device. Without hesitation, Kiramaru breaks the transmitter that produced the hologram, and Tauta doesn't find out anything. The next day, Tauta asks the busty woman why she wants to hide that Negi is alive. She does not answer. Shortly after, an elderly woman and her great-granddaughter arrive at the base. The great-grandmother wants to see Evangeline, while the young girl wants to see Tauta. The girl meets with our young man. The little girl introduces herself as Yukihiro and says that she is there to defeat the protagonist because he and his whole lineage always trick women to break their hearts. The protagonist doesn't understand a thing. It is then that Yukihiro tells him that her grandfather Negi was very popular with women, and it is rumored that he had relationships with his 30 students. The little girl attacks the protagonist, but he defends himself and defeats her in no time. Because of that, Yukihiro sees him as a suitable partner for her and proposes to make him her husband. Yukihiro tries to win over Tauta in every possible way. Meanwhile, Shinobu, Sakurame, Kiramaru, and Karin decide to compete for our young man's attention. However, in the end, it is Evangeline who wins that competition. That same afternoon, the busty woman asks to speak alone with the protagonist. The latter agrees. When they meet, Tauta realizes that Evangeline has her true appearance. Our young man gets to the point and asks her if she was in love with his grandfather Negi in the past. Tauta argues that when the hologram appeared, she acted strangely. She admits it but says that the hologram was not the real Negi. The blonde woman tells that in the past, Negi defeated an evil mage named Life Maker, but he sacrificed himself to do it. Although the most interesting thing is that the evil wizard has the ability to take over the bodies of his opponents, which means that Life Maker possessed Nega's body, and that hologram they saw before was that wizard. The little girl explains that, all this time, she and Fate looked for a way to save Negi. However, both have opposing views on what they should do, and that's why they are now enemies. Our young man tries to process all the information. After that, Tauta asks her about his parents. Evangeline replies that he doesn't have parents, as he is a clone made with the genetic information of Negi and Asuna. Those individuals he recognized as parents were his guardians. That would explain why the protagonist doesn't remember anything about his past, since there is no such past. The next day, Tauta tells Kiramaru about the discovery. Noticing that the boy was down, Yukihiro invites him to the Mahora exhibition tournament. The protagonist accepts the invitation. Tauta is very excited upon arriving as the fighters are very colorful. The little blonde girl tells him that the real Mahora tournament will take place next year, and the participant who wins the exhibition competition will enter directly. Tauta tries to participate, but he finds out that all the spots are closed. Walking around the place, our hero meets Yukihiro's great-grandmother. The old lady comments that in the past she was a student of Negi at Mahora Academy. Two more women enter the scene. A brunette and a green-haired android who takes care of the elderly woman. All three were students of Negi. Tauta soon discovers the classroom where his grandfather used to teach, and there he meets another character, a girl with purple hair. I guess this is fanservice for those who saw the anime Nejima. All the women in the classroom begin to feel nostalgic, as they know the true identity of Tauta, that he is a Negi clone. Suddenly, the principal receives a call informing her that one of the participants in the exhibition tournament did not show up. And knowing that Tauta wanted to participate, she lets him fill that vacancy. Our boy will have to fight against a hooded woman named Tartaros. The battle begins and the girl beats the crap out of him. Due to the damage he received, Tauta transforms and uses Ariba energy. Nevertheless, the girl knocks him out. Our hero does not give up and tries to keep fighting. It is then that the evil wizard Life Maker appears, controlling Nega's body. The former wants to take Tauta because he needs him to do villainous things. However, our hero's allies don't allow it. Evangeline, Kiramaru, and the others come into play to protect the protagonists. For his part, Life Maker does the same and summons all his allies. The duel between both groups is inevitable. Things take an unexpected turn when Tauta is trapped by a dark mass that transports him to a mental plane called Phantagoria. While there, the protagonist meets Cunnels. The talking sword tells our young hero that Cunnels created him and is a wizard with incredible power. Tauta does his best to process everything. Cunnels tells the protagonist that the only way to defeat the evil magician Lifer Maker is to go through Evangeline's memories. Our young hero sees how his great-grandfather Nagi saved Evangeline from death, and because of that, she became attached to him and decided to follow him. 15 years later, when Nagi disappeared, she enrolled in the magical school of Mahora, where she met Negi, who would be the protagonist's grandfather, although Tauta is more of a clone than a grandson. But it's almost the same thing. Our young hero watches Evangeline's memories and sees how she ended up falling in love with Negi, which greatly moves him since he had never seen her so happy. Suddenly, things turn dark as Evangeline recognizes Tauta. The atmosphere changes, and a woman named Lelda enters the scene, introducing herself as Life Maker. The evil witch immediately attacks Evangeline and cuts her in half. Kennels, who had been deceiving the protagonist all this time, does the same and cuts Tauta in half. At that critical moment, Tauta summons strength from within, saves the blonde girl, and re-enters the fight. Having a little more control, the girl reveals that they are both inside a mental plane called Phantagoria, where Life Maker has all the advantages. Due to that, Evangeline creates a square made with her magic to make things even. However, everything gets worse as the evil witch's mental powers are very strong. At that critical moment, a young girl named Asuna appears and breaks the mental illusion that the villain had created. The girl reveals to the protagonist that they used Negas and her blood to create the illusion, so she would be his mother-grandmother. Better not to complicate things. Later, Evangeline appears, and it seems the young girl with pigtails also saved her. After that, she tells them that Asuna's real body is trapped elsewhere, and she is there because her essence is inside Tauta. Minutes later, the villain appears and tries to attack them, but the girl with pigtails protects them. Asuna explains to Tauta how to defeat the evil witch. The first step is to return to reality, then he must fight, and after 37 seconds, his hidden power will appear. With the necessary information to win, our hero leaves Phantagoria and returns to the real world. Already in reality, the final battle begins. The main group manages to get the upper hand thanks to the information Asuna gave them. Tauta attacks Negi without hesitation to save him from Life Maker's possession. The clash is very uneven, as Negi's strength surpasses Tauta's. Due to that, Tauta attacks Negi without hesitation to save him from the possession of Life Maker. The clash is very unequal since Negi's strength exceeds Tauta's. Fate and Evangeline appear to support our young hero. The albino does something strange and causes the four to release their essence and communicate with each other. It is then that Negi asks his former allies, Fate and Evangeline, to defeat him and vanquish the evil witch, Life Maker. He tells Tauta that he seems like a good kid and to take care of the blonde girl. The four then return to the real world and start fighting. Negi transforms and beats them all, but Tauta also transforms. Now grandfather and grandson have the same abilities. Unfortunately, one of Negi's comrades attacks our boy by surprise and knocks him out of the fight. And to make matters worse, all of Tauta's allies suffer the same fate. Just as the bad guys were about to take the protagonist's life, Sakuraim protects him. As a result, Tartaros begins to torture her, stabbing her and forcibly removing her teeth. Despite all that, the girl remains calm and tells the protagonist that they succeeded. They held on for 37 seconds. Tauta remembers what Asuna had told him. Suddenly, the battlefield changes and Negi is transported to Mahora Academy where his former students begin attacking him with affection. During the fight, the students explain that they too are part of Tauta's essence, and that's why they are there. Negi doesn't quite understand, as it was believed that only his genes and Asuna's were used to create the protagonist. The 30 students tell him that they wouldn't allow that, so they participated as well. This means that Tauta is a clone of Negi and his 30 students, but at this point, it's best not to question anything. After all of that, the characters return to the battlefield. Asuna appears and traps the villain with a magic circle. Negi realizes he's been caught and his only option is to escape or die. Before leaving, he tells Tauta that he'll be waiting for him at the top of the tower. In the end, no one dies and our young hero narrowly escapes. However, let's not forget that the protagonist and all of his allies are immortal. The next day, at UQ Holder Base, Tauta declares his feelings to the busty blonde. He tells her that he wants to spend eternity with her and even proposes marriage, although Evangeline tells him no. After that, the other girls get angry with Tauta.